I'd like to take you down memory lane just a little bit to the Duplessis period in Quebec, when you started working in Les Compagnons de Saint-Laurent. And I'd like to have a historical perspective of Les Compagnons de Saint-Laurent. What was Quebec theatre like at the time, and what role did Les Compagnons have in the Quebec theatre?
Yeah. At the time when Les Compagnons de Saint-Laurent were founded by Father Legault, unfortunately there was practically nothing going on in Quebec as far as the theatre is concerned. The crack of the economy during the late 20s and the early 30s were catastrophic for theatre. Everything was closed except for a few things, particularly in the popular area, melodramas and things like that. But there was absolutely nothing else. So when Les Compagnons were founded, it filled a vacuum there. It was a semi-professional company, but still with a good quality. And it is worthwhile mentioning that practically the great majority of the actors and the actresses of my age worked for Les Compagnons at a moment or another of their career.
The Hermitage, is this where you played, at the Hermitage Theatre?
Yes, we played there. I don't remember the exact date when we opened the Hermitage. It is on Côte des Neiges. It is a hall, a place that was connected with Le Collège de Montréal. But I don't think they used it, the Sulpicians used it very often. So Le Père Legault, Father Legault succeeded in renting it or having it for free. I don't remember exactly. And during many years, the productions of Les Compagnons de Saint-Laurent were presented on the stage of the Hermitage.
What were your feelings at the time? Were you an eager beaver in the business? Had you already turned your back totally on your medical studies and decided to go straight ahead?
No. I was still studying medicine, and I left medicine only in 1946, and I went with Les Compagnons de Saint-Laurent in 1939, and I left them in 1942. And at that time I played with a great French actress of Russian origin whose name is Ludmila Pitoev, who founded her own company here in Montreal, and from 42 to 46 I played with her. And at the beginning of 1946 I decided to leave medicine and give myself entirely to theatre. But before that time, I probably, to be honest, within myself, I wished to become an actor without having the courage of making the real decision. But at the beginning of 46, that was it.
The end of sitting on the fence. By 47, there were groups of Quebec began to attract the attention of the Canadian Dominion Drama Festival.
Yes.
Les Compagnons de Saint-Laurent won the Grand Prix with Le Médecin Malgré Lui.
That's right, yes.
How did the theatrical community view the Dominion Drama Festival, and was this prize like out of the blue for you guys?
In Quebec, it must be said that the DDF was perceived as a amateur organization, and we nosed down on it a little bit, but still, it was considered an honor to have an award from them. But for an actor like myself, for example, I must say that I was in Europe during that period. I went to Europe from 46 to 51. But I would not consent to perform for the DDF. I would have considered it as, something like under my level of quality.
When you were in France, you again saw Ludmilla Pitov. Did you study together?
Yes. Well, I didn't study. In fact, I worked with her. Not regularly in France. I worked on two special occasions in Doll's House for the first time in 46 and 47, and in a production of Joan of Arc's Trial. And I went on tour with Doll's House during a period of practically a couple of years, 47 and 48. So I learned by working, in fact. In French, we would say that j'ai appris sur le tas. I don't know how you say it in English.
I won't dare to translate that. But this marked you, and you largely brought back this appreciation of la comédie française and that sort of tradition. Did you feel it was lacking in Quebec, or did you think this was something that we needed to bring over here?
No, my intention was not to bring back here what was done in Europe. I was greatly fed by what I saw in Europe, and not particularly at La Comédie Française, because La Comédie Française is always in the same situation. You can see marvelous productions there. By the way, I don't think that they perform Molière so good. I think that the best of their ability is with playwrights like Musset, for example. But it changed a lot. I'm not familiar with the work of La Comédie Française presently. But I was more impressed by the productions that I was attending in other theaters. My aim, and the aim of my friends like Jean Gascon and others, was to bring back from Europe the feeling of a professional theater, because we considered that our theater at that time, I'm not trying to judge what was going on in Quebec during the 20s and the beginning of the 30s, but at the end of the 40s and the beginning of the 50s, my feeling was that there was no real professional theater going on in the province of Quebec. No actors and no actresses were really earning their lives with the theater. We were earning our lives in radio, and after that it was with the television, but the stage was a minimal earning for us. And I don't mean to be snob, but the quality of the productions at that time were not very high. It was a good quality, but not a real professional quality. And our objective, when I say our, I'm referring mainly to Jean Gascon, our objective was to establish in Montreal and in the province of Quebec in general a real professional theater with a professional level of quality.
Can you tell me a little more about Gascon? How did you meet him, and what role would he play throughout his life in the Quebec city?
Well, we were studying at the same institution together. That was Le Collège de Sainte-Marie. And at Le Collège de Sainte-Marie, that was run by the Jesuit fathers, the theatre was a extracurricular matter that was very important. Every year there were 2, 3, or 4 productions done with the pupils of Le Collège Sainte-Marie, and right from the beginning, the first year I came in Le Collège Sainte-Marie, I played in one of those productions, and curiously enough, it was the part of Argan in Le Malade Imaginaire, so it was a part that was much older than I was at that time, and I played regularly in those productions, and that's how I met Jean Gascon for the first time. He was a little older than I, so he was a year over the year of study I was attending. But we met on the occasion of a production. I think that the first time we really met was in a play on Joan of Arc, and I was playing myself Joan of Arc, and Jean was playing the Duke of Alençon. And after that we became great friends, and when we worked together within Les Compagnons de Saint-Laurent, we left for Europe practically together. I arrived at the beginning of September 46, and he came to Paris at the end of the same month. And during our stay there, we saw each other extensively. We discussed the possibility of founding a company when we are back in Montreal. And when I came back in 1951, Jean was working in Rennes with la compagnie, le Centre Dramatique de l'Ouest. And he decided to come back to Canada because his wife was waiting for another child, a second child. And the difficulties of living in Europe at that time were such that it was practically impossible to have a honest living with 2 children with what he was earning at Le Centre Dramatique de l'Ouest. So he decided to come back to Montreal, and immediately he came back, I think, in February 1951, and we make a official announcement of the founding of the Théâtre du Nouveau Monde during the following summer. And we started producing on the fall of 1951.
In October of 51.
Yeah, the 9th of October.
Great friends are often have little differences. What was it about Gascon that made a synergy between you? What can you describe him as a person? Because he has a English-Canadian career too.
Yes,
So
yes.
he's quite a
He
character.
was the artistic director of the Stratford company for 5 or 6 years, I think. Jean had a great charm and a great dynamism, and he had that possibility of attracting around him the good people at the same time, the good people at the good time in the good positions. This is, by the way, the characteristic of a real animator, and he was a real animator. He knew how to provoke the energy around him, and even the enthusiasm around him. Of course, that didn't go without any faults, and the main faults of Jean is that he was occupying much space around him. When Jean came in a room, he was the only one, speaking and going around and making much noise because he had a very powerful voice. And I was not always in accord with the decisions he made, and after a few years, in 1943, I decided to quit. I was not happy with the choice of the plays. We really did not have any definite lines to make our choice, so that we were playing Molière, and the following production we were playing a musical or something like that. So I was not very happy with that, and I considered that it was practically impossible for me to bring any improvement in the choice of the plays. So I left le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde for a full period of three years, 43 to 46. At that time, and by the way, I didn't attend one theatrical performance during that period. I had enough of it. And during that period, I wrote and I performed for television exclusively. But in 46, Jean was appointed artistic director of Stratford in 66. Yeah. And I gave him a ring because I wanted to check if I was still interested in playing on stage, and I gave him a ring and I asked him if he would need my services for the 1966 season, and he said, well, we are producing again Henry V, in which we had performed in 1956 the French characters of the French court, and he said, yes, if you wish to come, I need you. So I came, I went to Stratford in 1966, and I played particularly Burgundy in Henry V and in Henry VI, and I played Kurt in Dance of Death. And at that time, during that summer, Jean came to me and said, till I'm appointed as a full artistic director for Stratford, I cannot be the artistic director of le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde anymore, and he asked me if I was interested in taking over. And I said, yes, I am. So I became the artistic director of le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde in 1966, and I stayed in that position for the following 16 years, in fact.
Can you give me some idea how you started TNM, Théâtre Nouveau Monde, financially? How did you get that going? How did you actually launch it?
That was a point for us to prove that we were really professional. We refused to bring any money of our own in the business. Anyway, we didn't have a cent of our own. So it was impossible for us to bring one in the business. So we, at that time, were introduced to a lawyer, a Quebec lawyer, whose name was Marc Drouin, by his cousin, Denis Drouin, who was an actor who was working in Montreal. And we discussed with him of our projects, and Marc told us, well, all right, I will try to help you, and he did, by convincing 10 of his friends to give a guarantee to the bank of $500 each. So by 10, it was a $5,000 guarantee. It was in 1951, so I think it should be multiplied by 10 to really understand the importance of such an amount of money at that time. And that's the way we started le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde. And at the end of the first season, we were able to give back everyone who had guarantee his own $500, the guarantee itself, and with the exception of one person, they all took back their guarantee, but there is one of them who said, no, keep it, it's yours. But at the end of that season, we ended by having by being in the black at the bank of a few $1,000s. I think it was a couple of thousand, but I may be wrong there. Maybe it was a couple of hundred. Don't remember exactly.
Do you realize how far ahead the Montreal and Quebec scene was than the rest of Canada in terms of professional theatre? I mean, they had American and British productions touring all the time.
Yes.
We were getting a real homegrown sort of thing going on here.
Yes, with the exception of the Crest Theatre. The Crest Theatre was practically similar to le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde, but that was the exception. Stratford was created the year later, in 52, if I'm, or no, during the summer of 51. So the Théâtre du Nouveau Monde started before Stratford, and the Stratford did not have at that. They immediately had the respect and the reputation that they enjoy presently, but it's a fact that at that time I think that le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde was exceptional, not only in Quebec but in the entire country.
But Stratford had, the Canadians are always impressed by foreigners, you know, they had Guthrie,
yes.
Feelgood. But what was happening in Quebec was very much a local thing.
That's right.
You know,
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yes.
What sort of what was the sensation then? Did you feel that you were part of something new and emerging, or did you feel you were took for granted?
The funny thing is that we didn't think about that when we started. I'm not speaking for Gratien Gélina because. Even if I know him very well, and even if he's my brother-in-law, I cannot speak for him. But as far as we were concerned, as far as le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde was concerned, we played on stage because we loved playing on stage and because we couldn't live without playing on stage. But we didn't have any real serious reflections or thinking on what we were bringing to our society. We didn't consider that we had any real social role to play in Quebec. We were in fact very egocentric. We were doing that for us. We were not even thinking of the public. That came later, and that came much later. I would say that came at the beginning of the 60s. In fact, we had the same evolution than the Quebec Society had. And when the Quebec Society gave up all the old tradition of the Duplessis period, that was in fact, the time that we started thinking of what we were bringing to our society and what we had to do for the public, to develop a public, to make the public more aware of the importance of the arts and the culture in the building up of a new society. But to be very honest, in the 50s we were not thinking about that. We were not considering ourselves as pioneers. We were doing what we were loving to do, and that's all.
What was George Groux's role in the Théâtre du Nouveau Monde?
We founded le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde with some other friends. So I hope I won't forget any. But Jean Gascon and myself, André Gascon, who was Jean's brother and who acted as the administrator, Georges Roux, Robert Gadouat, Éloi de Grandmont, Charles Lucier, who was not in the theater, but who was a friend, Marc Drouin, and another chap from Quebec City, Emile Cahouette, who acted as our producers in Quebec City and later as our agent in Canada and around the world. And Georges was a very close friend, and for many years he was part of the main core of the people who were really making le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde working and living.
I read somewhere that you chose the cheapest possible production you could at one point because of necessity. You looked around for what you could stage. I've got the title here somewhere. I can't find it though. But apparently, even despite the fact that you picked the least expensive thing to produce, you still had to lay off people. Were you faced with finance nightmares at the beginning?
At the beginning, no, because at the beginning we were practically not paying our actors. The actors were receiving something like $10 to $15 a performance. Mind you, it was dollars of that time. So again, it should be multiplied by 10 to have a real figure. But and we were performing 9 performances of one production. The second year it was 11. In other words, our production costs were very low. So we didn't have any financial difficulties for probably the first 20 years. And at that period, at the end of the 60s, the Arts Council of Montreal was created, and a couple of years later, the Canada Council was created. So we began receiving grants from those public bodies, and in the late 60s and the beginning of the 70s, the grants were sufficient to meet our needs. It is much later, not much later, but a few years later, let's say in the second half of the 70s, that we really began to suffer from our economic situation. That's not entirely true, because when Jean Gascon left at the end of the 60s, we already started suffering from our financial position, and not only from our financial position, but from the lack of recognition of particularly the public bodies. And Jean left because we didn't have any theater of our own. We had to go from a stage to another stage to be able to perform our productions. The conditions of working were beginning to be very improving, because we were not able to pay our actors a sufficient amount of money to hope to have from them a sufficient amount of time to be able to make good productions.
End of tape. We must change tapes.
Yeah.
Right now. So in about 56, I believe, the whole bunch of you went down to Stratford, and you enjoyed their luxurious theatre, right? No?
Well, that was the last season that Stratford performed under the tent. It was very how should I say that? It brought a great deal of enthusiasm because it was different. We were performing under a tent, so in very peculiar conditions, not always agreeable, because when we started rehearsing, it was during the month of March or April I think, and we were actually freezing during that rehearsal period. And when we started performing, it was in May, then we suffered from, of course, the heat and the incredibly high temperature that were very quickly going up under the tent, and of course there was no air condition system possible under that tent. But it was. I mean, it's. I consider that as very good souvenirs of that period.
And you obviously enjoyed working in the language of Shakespeare, as they say, and Shakespeare itself.
Yes, I enjoyed it, but it is very difficult, because as you can see, I'm not mastering the language. I have a lack of practice, in fact, so I have not the sufficient vocabulary, etc., etc. And the accent is what it is. So it's not easy, and it was not easy. But it was no, as I missed the word there. We were inspired, in fact, by the difficulty of what we were doing, and when we succeeded in finally performing in an English production of a Shakespearean play, I think we were very proud of being able to do that. And actually we were improving the fact that no English-speaking Canadian actor could do the reverse.
Indeed, you translated Shakespeare.
Yes.
And you also enjoyed playing Molière parts.
Of course, yes. Shakespeare, Molière, but other playwrights. My favorite, in fact, are Chekhov, Claudel, and Shakespeare, and Molière.
The predecessor of Gascon at Stratford, of course,
Michael.
Lang.
Yeah.
What were your impressions of working with him? What type of artistic director would you describe him as?
Oh, marvelous one. Marvelous. Michael, if you don't knew him, looked as being very cold and very distant. And that's the way he directed. In not seeming to really being able to touch a thing, because he would make his hands dirty. But if you scratched a little, you found the most sensitive man in the world, and he had a way of expressing himself and the way of explaining his aims so clearly that it was fun working with him. And what we learned from our English-speaking colleagues was that the theatre, a production theatre, is a matter of imagination, but it is also a matter of organization. And we learned a lot from Stratford as far as the material organization of a production is concerned. Before that, we used to, organize a production as it came. We didn't foresee the problems. We We were bringing solutions one after the other at the same tempo as the problems were surfacing. But working in Stratford made us learn how to really organize a production so that the imagination is fully used.
Gratien Gelina played down there.
Yes, he played the French king.
Okay.
Yeah.
As well as Dr. Caius and
In the Merry Wives, yes, that's right.
And how was he received down there? Because he was already an enfant well, he was already very well known in Quebec.
Oh yes,
Great success.
And he was very well known in Canada because he had toured all over Canada with the Peacock in particular. So he was highly respected. He was at the height of his career. He had, I don't know how many honorary doctorates. We were making a little fun about that. But he was highly respected. He was considered as a dean of the profession.
I think I would have to step back to say that the Théâtre du Nouveau Monde billed Canadian authors for the first time in '54.
Yeah.
What initiated that decision?
When we started, we were having such a position that we considered that we couldn't produce a Quebec author if the quality of the play could not be compared to the quality of the foreign play. And for many years we considered that no Quebec playwright was good enough for us. It was a little pretentious, I think. Maybe we were right to do that, but anyway, all our friends around us, and particularly the playwrights, I'm thinking particularly of Françoise Loranger, were complaining about that. And we had great discussions with them. And at a point I was convinced that we had something to do in that area. That if you don't produce plays by local authors, the dramaturgy cannot develop. And I was convinced that a company like Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde had some, do you say duties? Toward the community of the Quebec playwrights. So I suggested to organize a concours, how do you say that? A contest. Since it was very difficult for us to really make a choice, take a choice among the plays that were brought to us, I suggested to organize a contest, and I suggested that Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde would assure that the winner would be produced. And that was accepted. And we got a little amount of money from, at that time it was called le Secrétariat de la Province de Québec, because the Department of Cultural Affairs was not created at that time. We got, I think, a couple of $1,000. That was the prize for the winner. The contest went on for about 4 years. The first year, if I remember well, was won by André Langevin, who is a great Quebec novelist. And the play was called L'œil du peuple. The year later, if I remember well, it was André Laurent's Deux femmes terribles. And the third year, it was a play called Les taupes by François Moreau. And that was in 63 63, I think, or 62, 63. And that was the year when I left. So unfortunately, the year later, the winner was not produced. And the contest gave up. But, mind you, at that time in the 60s, as I said before, Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde started to be conscient of his social role and of the role it had in developing local dramaturgy, a national dramaturgy. So Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde started regular productions of Quebec authors like Félix-Antoine Savard, Jacques Languirand, etc., etc. And when I took over from Jean in 66, from that time to the time I left, we produced at least one Quebec authors play a season, if not two. And we started using Quebec adaptations of modern foreign plays as well.
With respect to Jean Gascon, you were just mentioning he left, but he sort of never, he went to Stratford. How alienated did he get from Quebec? He never really came back.
No. It was a heartbreaking situation. Because when Jean left, as I explained earlier, he left, let's say, banging the doors behind him. He was not happy about his own situation with Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde, and he was not happy with the situation of Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde in our society. So he accepted the offer from Stratford, and he left, and I don't think he had any intention of coming back. I'm not sure, but anyway, he, in French we would say, il a rompu les ponts.
Burned his bridges?
Yes, behind him.
Oh yeah.
And when after, I think it was in 74, but I'm not sure. No, sooner than that, 72 I think. When he left Stratford, I think that Jean was convinced that the red carpet would be used for his coming back to Montreal and the province of Quebec, and that he would have to refuse a lot of offers and the hundreds of offers that would be made to him. And of course, that was not the reality. So he felt very unhappy about that situation and very bitter. And it was not a good attitude, neither for him or for the public in general, or the artistic and theatrical milieu. So Jean never regained the situation, the position that was his own, that should be his own. He worked in Ottawa at the Canadian National Centre, but in such a way that his position there was not very clearly defined. He was a director of the theatre, but he had at the same time a director of the French theatre and a director of the English theatre. So it was not, his role was not clearly defined, and he worked a little in Edmonton, if I remember well, and in Winnipeg. But he, as I said, he never regained the position that should be his own in Quebec. And at that time, I must say that I was not inclined to see him a lot, because he was so bitter that he was always insisting on the injustice that he was undergoing in Montreal and in the province of Quebec. And I really found back Jean with the cherry orchard. I was asked by the director to play the part of Gaïef in the cherry orchard. And the director was looking for an actor playing the old servant, what's his name? Fierce, I think is the name. And I said, why not you ask Jean? He's not working, he's not doing anything. And he feels unhappy and bitter about that. Why don't you ask him? And the director said, oh, it's such a small part. I said, ask him. And he asked him, and Jean accepted. And we shared the same dressing room. And that's really the day when I found him back. And it was in 1980, what was the date exactly? I don't remember, but you can easily find that. And I remember we started playing Cherry Orchard in Ottawa. And I remember an evening coming in the dressing room, and I said to Jean, Jean, I'm finding you back exactly as you were. You are occupying all the place. It's impossible to speak because you speak too loud, and we laughed a lot about that. And as you know, when he left Cherry Orchard, he went back to Stratford. He was directing My Fair Lady, and I think it was a great event for him. He felt again important, and he had to feel important to be happy. And he died during the rehearsal period. But I think that, fortunately enough, he had regained his status before dying.
You were among those who went and performed. You mentioned it earlier, the Crest Theatre in Toronto. Can you tell me what the experience is like when you worked at the Crest?
I never worked at the Crest.
It's amazing. So we got some bad research here.
No.
Wrongo. Did you know the Davises at all? The Davis brothers?
Yeah, well, we knew Don the first time we went to Stratford in '56. In fact, he was playing Burgundy in that production, and we became very good friends. I didn't know his brother. What's his name? Anyway, I didn't know him as well as I knew Don, but during that period of time we were very great friends together.
What role did Jacques Letourneau and Monique Lepage play in the Quebec theatre development?
Well, they founded a company in the beginning of the 50s. I think it was 54 or 55. I don't remember the exact date. That was called Le Théâtre Club. And they produced plays like Musset, like Molière. It was practically the same repertory that we were using at Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde, but they felt like being able to fly by their own wings and not being under the cover of the big brother that was Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde at that time. And their role was relatively important, but it was very short. I think that the Théâtre Club closed because of financial difficulties some 5 or 6 years later. It was an important role they played, but I'm afraid to say that it was not an essential one. In other words, Quebec theatre could do without it.
Le Rideau Vert, was that also such an example?
No. No, Le Rideau Vert is older than le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde. It was created a couple of years before le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde. I think it was in 49. And at the beginning, Le Rideau Vert was performing Parisian successes. It was the same attitude towards the choice of the plays as we had, I think, in Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde. In other words, they were choosing the plays because Yvette loved a part that was in that play for her, things like that, reasons like that. And I think that I can say that they were influenced by Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde, so that little by little the repertoire changed, and they started playing Chekhov, for example. They started playing Molière and other classical authors. They started playing plays written by Quebec authors like Marie-Claire Blais, Françoise Loranger. And I must say that for the last 10 or 15 years, Le Théâtre du Rideau Vert is really occupying a place of his own in the Quebec panorama, theatrical panorama.
Okay, the Montreal festivals.
That's... Let me say, let me think about that.
Can I come back to it?
Yeah. Well, no, I can answer that. But I don't think they had a very influential role to play in the artistic and cultural field of Quebec. They were producers. They had money. And they were producing big things, symphonies, plays, and they had the money to do it. But to my knowledge, they never played an essential role in the development of the Quebec theater or the Quebec artistic scene. And they ended producing, I don't remember, at the end of the 50s or the beginning of the 60s, and I don't think it was really missed.
Would you like to change tapes?
Still have 6 minutes?
Oh, I thought I had it 1 minute.
No, that was 7.
Oh, 7. Sorry about that. Good, that's great. What role did groups such as the Anjou and Le Théâtre de Legault play?
Anjou was a place, that's all. That was a very small theater where le Théâtre du Rideau Vert performed at the beginning of the 50s. Les Grégor is another thing. Les Grégor was founded by it's a very good friend, and I see her and I can't remember her name. Anyway, it will come back to me. And immediately Les Grégor made such choices that they differentiate itself from Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde, because the plays that they were choosing were chosen practically all in the modern living playwrights. And the quality of the productions was very high, and because they were doing a repertoire that was different from Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde, it occupied really a place for itself.
I was also asked to bring up the Jésus, which I know is basically a theater, but what was special about it as a theater?
It was cheap. No, that's a fact. It was cheap, but it had a real soul. It was an incredible theatre. The width was something like, I don't remember, 40 feet, I think, but the height was 12. So we used to say that we were doing a theatroscope, with an incredibly large stage, but lacking in height. But it had a soul, you know. Le Jésus was what we called la salle académique. It was used by Le Collège Sainte-Marie for the on monthly occasions of what was called la lecture des notes. And all the pupils of Le Collège Sainte-Marie were occupying the seats, and there were more than 800 of them at that time. And that was a place where the productions of the plays played by the pupils of Le Collège Sainte-Marie were performed. So it had a tradition. It was full of history, of various presences there that can be felt when you went in that place. They restored it. It's not the same thing, but they made a very good job with the restoration. But it has not the same charm as it used to have when we opened our first production of L'Avare there on the 9th of October. And we performed there till the end of 58, if I remember well. But we had to submit our plays to the authorities of Le Collège Sainte-Marie. And I must say that it was fair, because they were the owners of the place, so they had the right to check our choice and see if it was not against their own religious convictions. But as the time went on, we began to feel that censorship, because it was censorship, more and more. And when, for example, when we performed La Biche there, we had to fight and convincing them that since it was a comedy, that it was not as important as if it was a serious play, so that we can admit that a young chap would sleep with a woman who would not be his wife and things, but we had to fight for it. At one point in the 55 or 56, we submitted a Graham Greene's play, The Power and the Glory. And I'll try to remind the exact wording of the refusal that came from the father there, who was Father Daughter. He said, "I admit that a priest can drink. I admit that a priest can have a mistress. I admit that a priest can have a child from that mistress. But it's not a good thing to tell." And we had to give up. A few years later, yeah.